Drive-through safari parks are popular visitor attractions around the world. While you're probably all too aware of the risks that your windscreen wipers may be stolen by mischievous monkeys, or that you might encounter a curious lion that walks over to your vehicle, one of the most obvious safety precautions at places like these is that you should stay inside your car at all times. A French family seemingly missed this piece of advice on visiting the Bergen Safari Park near the Dutch city of Tilburg in 2018. However, as video footage shows them and their children leaving their car to get a closer look at the cheetahs, the cats suddenly leap up when they spot the stupid guests and begin to prowl around them to plan their attack. The family are surrounded by the cheetahs and realize the danger they put themselves in, and were able to run back to the safety of their car before the wild animals moved in for the kill. The safari park owner said they were extremely lucky to have made it out alive, and even though guests are told in several languages that they must stay in their vehicles, there's still a few each year that take a risk like this. Despite the best efforts by zookeepers and most owners, there's no escaping the fact that containing animals within artificial enclosures is inherently unfair to the creatures, and it's no substitute for the lives they would have had in the wild. Quite often, they'll sit around without much to do. Things are only made worse when idiotic guests decide to try to encourage them to do something. This footage was recorded at the lion enclosure at Amsterdam Zoo. The stunning cats are minding their own business when a group of visitors begins throwing snowballs at them. Unsurprisingly, this riles the lions, who leap up into an aggressive posture, not just because they're being tormented, but because snow isn't exactly something they're used to coming into contact with. When they realize there's nothing they can do to prevent attack, the lions start to huddle together to protect each other. It's a horrific example of how stupid people can be when visiting a zoo, and is definitely not appropriate behavior. With the advent of Instagram and the fact that we all now have powerful cameras on our smartphones, it's rare to go anywhere without seeing someone taking a selfie. Sometimes the quest for the perfect image can put you in danger. In March of 2019, a visitor to the Wildlife World Zoo in Arizona learned this the hard way, after jumping over a protective barrier to take a photo of herself with a jaguar in the background. There was still a fence between her and the animal, which she stupidly believed would mean she was safe. But the big cat had other ideas. As she turned her back on it, it swiped its paw through the gap in the fence and slashed her arm, leaving huge gashes. Onlookers helped to distract the jaguar to make it let go of her, but by that time the damage had been done. She was rushed to the hospital to be treated, while the zoo sent their prayers to her family for her quick recovery. The owner said in an interview that there's no way to fix people going over barriers if they don't realize that they're there for a reason. Pandas are notoriously lazy creatures, and if you ever see one in a zoo, the chances are it won't be moving around much, and will spend most of its time sitting in one position. This can be frustrating for excited guests, however, and some decide to take things into their own hands to make things more interesting. In this footage, which was recorded in Beijing Zoo in 2019, instead of shouting at the bear, which would have been bad enough, two guests started pelting the panda with rocks to try to wake it up. According to the person who filmed it, the first person threw smaller rocks, and the second person, who was not caught on camera, threw larger pieces over the space of 30 minutes. Fortunately, on this occasion, the panda wasn't injured at all and continued on with its usual daily routine. But there's no way the culprits could have known that that would be the case. By the time the zoo found out about it, it was too late to track them down and punish them. But anyone caught doing something like this is rightfully charged and imprisoned for animal cruelty. Ever since humans have been able to write, they've been obsessed with etching their names onto things. Graffiti has been found on Roman ruins and even older structures that prove this is true. But have you ever heard of someone carving their name into a living animal? That's what an idiotic couple decided to do in 2019 at the La Palmer Zoo in southwestern France. Officials noticed something unusual about one of the rhino's backs, and upon closer inspection found the names of Camille and Julien had been scratched into the dirt and flaky skin. The zoo has an exhibit where guests can get close to the animals with just a small barrier between them, so they can stroke them and really get a feel for what the animals are like. But the idea of marking one of them like this is unforgivable. The zoo said in a statement that they were outraged by the stupidity and disrespect shown by the two visitors, and while they wouldn't be prosecuting them, they wouldn't be welcome back. As for the words that had been left on the rhino, it was nothing that a scrub with a brush couldn't remove, and it was probably completely unaware that it had been done in the first place. Brazil is home to some of the most biodiverse regions in the world. You'd think that if anyone was aware of how dangerous some animals can be and the importance of respecting them, that it would be the people who have grown up there. It seems, though, that alcohol causes all knowledge of this to disappear, and in 2011 a man was caught on camera doing something incredibly stupid. João Leite dos Santos was a mechanic from Sao Paulo, later admitted he had been drinking all day before visiting the nearby Sorocaba Zoo, but had no memory of what happened when he got there. On the video, he's seen climbing over a fence, jumping into a pool, and then swimming towards a group of spider monkeys in the enclosure. These animals are definitely not as friendly as they may seem. They gathered by the water's edge and started reaching out for him, perhaps mistakenly thinking they were trying to rescue him from the water. The man gets even closer, but when he's within reach, one of the monkeys sunk its teeth into his wrist, and another started biting his shoulder and arm. Unbeknownst to him, spider monkeys are highly territorial. He felt threatened the moment he had crossed the fence. Realizing he'd made a huge mistake, Dos Santos headed back towards the fence, where several zookeepers helped to pull him to safety and administered medical assistance. The bites were so severe that he was taken to hospital to be treated, and police began building a case to charge him for reckless behavior. Peacocks are some of the most beautiful birds you'll find anywhere in the world, with huge plumes of feathers that branch out when they're trying to attract a mate. With such stunning patterns, people often like to collect the feathers. Usually this is only done by searching for ones that have fallen off naturally. In 2018, however, a group of tourists who were visiting the Zuyuan Zoo in Jiangsu, China, did something unimaginable. They jumped into the peacock enclosure and started to pluck feathers from 4 of the birds. They removed so many that the peacocks hardly had any left by the end of the ordeal, and they were bleeding profusely from where they had been attacked. Fortunately, none of them died as a result. They were quickly taken from the enclosure to a quarantine facility where they were treated and began to recover. In a worrying twist, one of the managers from the zoo said this wasn't the first time someone had tried to do this, and there simply weren't enough staff to keep an eye on people's behavior all the time. This particular enclosure had 41 peacocks with just 3 members of staff assigned to look after them, which is nowhere near enough to make sure they are safe with so little fencing to separate people from them. Penguins are undoubtedly some of the coolest birds on Earth. Because they usually live in such hostile or difficult-to-reach environments, the only places people are normally able to see them is in a zoo. The fact that they seem so happy to be in artificial enclosures is misleading, because they'd much prefer to be in the open ocean. But their overall happy appearance means that not only are they one of the most popular exhibits at the zoo, but people also often think they'd make for great pets, and would be fine if they were around people. In 2012, after an evening of heavy drinking, 2 Welsh friends who were traveling through Australia thought it would be funny to try to rescue one of the penguins from the SeaWorld on Queensland's Gold Coast. They brazenly broke into the venue with a local after attending a nearby beach party. And then the 3 of them started by swimming in a pool with dolphins. Once they got out, they found a fire extinguisher, which they set off in the shark tank, and then they turned their sights on the penguins. They carefully entered the enclosure and caught a 7-year-old fairy penguin called Dirk, took it home with them. According to statements that were filed during their prosecution, the friends woke up the next morning with the penguin in their apartment and had no memory of how it had got there. They tried to look after it by feeding it and putting it in the shower to keep it wet, but once they realized how difficult this would be, they tried to set the penguin free in a nearby canal. Thankfully, a group of locals saw them doing this and had heard of the incident at the aquarium, so they called the police, who quickly arrested the men and made sure the penguin was returned safely to its enclosure. The 2 men were then charged for trespassing and theft and were fined $1,000 Australian dollars each, which is the equivalent of around $720 US. While they aren't the largest species of cat in the world, lions have somewhat of a reputation for being some of the most dangerous and unpredictable ones, so are probably the last animals you'd want to willingly enter a cage with, especially without any experience or protective equipment. In 2004, though, a man in Taiwan did possibly the stupidest thing to ever take place in a zoo by doing just that. He had been visiting Taipei Zoo and, according to eyewitness reports, seemed to become possessed and intent on converting the lions to Christianity. He jumped over the fence into the enclosure and started shouting towards them that Jesus would save them. The 2 cats, a lion and a lioness, ignored him at first, but this just made him try harder. He started asking them to bite him, and eventually they did just that. They leapt towards him, attacked his right arm, and tore his clothes to pieces. Amazingly, the zookeepers were on the scene quickly and were able to deter the lions with water hoses and tranquilizer darts. They were able to get the man to safety. Despite the ordeal, he somehow managed to get away with just minor injuries to his arm and leg, something the keeper said happened because the lions had only just been fed. If they were hungry when the man entered, there's no chance he would have made it out alive. He was called Cheng Chong Ho, and it's likely he was suffering from a delusion that made him believe he was living a real-life version of the story of Daniel in the lion's den from the Bible. Perhaps it truly was a miracle that he survived, or that he was just extremely lucky.
Man strips naked and jumps into a Chilean zoo's enclosure in a bid to feed himself to a big cat, and only survives in a grave condition after two beasts mauling him were shot dead. A man who stripped naked and entered a lion enclosure in the Chilean zoo has survived the incident, but the lions were killed. Authorities in Santiago confirmed that the two African lions were put down as they severely mauled the 20-year-old man who had broken into their cage early on Saturday. The man, who has been named by local media as Franco Luis Forada Roman, was taken to a nearby hospital for treatment and was said to be in grave condition.
Tourists and locals watch in disbelief as a man climbs the fence of a giraffe enclosure to do something that could end his life. Hey. The man mounts the giraffe on its back, agitating the animal and eventually making it do something shocking. Giraffes are generally not considered dangerous to humans. They are peaceful and typically avoid confrontation, posing minimal threat to people. After falling, he stands back up and immediately starts climbing the fence again to show everyone he has yet to learn his lesson. Sure enough, the animal kicks him off its back again, and he hits a pole while falling, finally learning the hard way. He climbs back up the fence, but this time to go outside the enclosure. A woman can be seen being recorded by tourists after deciding to jump into a lion enclosure and come face to face with a lion. Avoid making sudden movements, maintaining eye contact, or turning your back to the animal to reduce potential aggression when facing a lion. The woman decides to break most of these rules by proceeding to dance while face to face with a predator that can rip her to shreds. The predator remains calm and keeps staring at the woman, waiting for an excellent opportunity to attack her as soon as she turns her back. Lions can sprint up to 50 miles an hour at impressive speeds, swiftly closing distances in brief sprints when pursuing prey. Unfortunately, the clip ends there, and what happens next in the encounter is unknown. A woman jumps into a lion enclosure at the famous Bronx Zoo, talking to the lion in the enclosure as if she is not in danger.
Throwing money in the air. Officials believe she has pulled a stunt like this before. Here's Amber Cagliano.
What is she thinking?
Lions can display aggression towards humans, particularly in territorial disputes or when feeling threatened, making caution essential around them. This encounter could go wrong at any moment, as we see the woman turning her back on the predator and causing a stir in general.
Into the lion enclosure at the Bronx Zoo. Yup, she's professing her love for the king.
These actions can easily trigger the predator to lunge and attack her at any moment, but luckily for her, it doesn't. She gets out of this encounter safely, but hopefully this will be the last. Tourists can be heard screaming and panicking as they watch a man try his best to fight a lion with his bare hands. After getting drunk and jumping into a lion enclosure, a man receives the terrifying realization of the mistake he made after the lion does this. As apex predators, lions pose a danger if threatened or their territory is encroached upon, displaying aggression to protect their domain. The drunk man tries playing it cool by shouting at the animal and making himself look big, but ultimately to no avail. The predator, ever so curious, continues taunting and lunging at the drunk tourist, scaring everyone watching the terrifying encounter. What happens next is unknown, as the clip ends without showing what happens to the man. This next frightening but infuriating encounter shows a man smiling as he enters a lion enclosure while his friend records him outside. The man then begins to taunt the lion, while it responds by roaring and growling at the arrogant man. Lions can swiftly inflict severe harm on humans. The speed at which they can fatally injure varies, showcasing their powerful jaws. Despite this, the predator is afraid to move, probably due to several abuses by the people managing the enclosure. Although the man probably knows this already, he is still in dangerous territory, as nothing separates him from an apex predator. The animal refuses to fight back, and the man retreats outside with a smug smile. Screams of fear and panic can be heard coming from tourists watching a drunk man fighting his way out after falling into a lion enclosure. Lions can display aggression towards humans, particularly in perceived threats, protecting territory, or encountering humans near their cubs or their prey. The lions try to get closer to the drunk man, prompting him to throw rocks at the predators to drive them away. The whole encounter is both adrenaline pumping and frightening, making the bystanders watch in fear and curious about what happens next. Moments later, a few bystanders call his attention, throwing a rope down for him to climb and save himself from impending doom. He successfully climbs out of the enclosure, making everybody watching sigh in relief. Tourists record tigers relaxing inside their enclosure when one of the predators suddenly focuses on something in the distance. The person recording the encounter notices this and immediately pans to what the tiger is staring at, revealing something extremely shocking. A man can be seen trying to climb down a visitor's fence, enticing the tiger and prompting it to do something terrifying. Tigers can swiftly pounce, leaping distances up to 10 meters or 33 feet to ambush their targets, showcasing their remarkable hunting prowess. After seeing how fast the tiger closes the distance between them, the man immediately regrets his decision and retreats. Thankfully, he decides to follow through, or things could have gone bad quickly.